Welcome to my third installment. This is Viper01, third installment of my trucking, introduction to trucking, I guess you want to call it. I'm going to talk about hours of service. Now, hours of service, if you just viewed the driver's daily log video, you'll know that hours of service is very important. You have to know how many hours you're allowed to drive today, tomorrow, next week, and when you got to take a break. Now, there are several rules that you got to watch, and the rules are different. The rules I'm going to go over are for Canada, south of the 60-degree parallel. Okay, the laws change a little bit when you go north of the 60, but south of the 60, these are going to be the rules I'm going to cover. There's several rules that you need to know. Okay, the first one is within 160 kilometers air radius of your home base, you don't need to run a logbook, believe it or not. So if you are within 160 kilometers of your home base, this thing you do not need. I was a little shocked to find that out when I was in class, but a long time ago, but nevertheless, there you go. I still recommend doing it because it covers your ass, but you don't have to. Police can ask you for it even if you don't have to do it, but I would just do it anyway. Okay, now for the rules, there's the 13-hour rule. Actually, I'll start with the 10-hour rule. Okay, 10 hours you must be off duty in a 24-hour period. 8 of those have to be consecutive. Okay, so you have to have 8 consecutive hours off, plus another 2, say maybe lunch, supper, taking a shower break, whatever. But you have to be off duty 10 hours in a 24-hour period. 8 of them have to be consecutive. Okay, that's law. Don't let anybody push you into doing anything otherwise, because then you are violating the law. Doesn't matter whether your boss tells you whatever, they're trying to get you to violate the law. So don't violate any of these rules. Okay, now the 13-hour rule is the maximum amount of time you're allowed behind the wheel in 24 hours. So 13 hours behind the wheel in a 24-hour block. Okay? So in other words, I mean, that could be 24 hours from noon one day to noon the next day. Could be 8 p.m. one day to 8 p.m. the next day. But you're only allowed 13 hours behind the wheel in a 24-hour block. Okay? There's also a 14-hour rule. Maximum on-duty time is 14 hours. This includes your drive time. So, say you are on duty 14 hours, but you've only done 10 hours of that driving. Can you drive that extra 2 hours? No, you're not allowed. Okay? You're done. Next is a 16-hour rule. I had some stuff here on the 16-hour rule, but that's resetting cycles, and I mean there's all kinds of charts you can go for. But anyway, the 16-hour rule, it's probably better if I just tell you, is the maximum allowed time between your 8 consecutive off hours. Okay, so you start the day, you've been off for 8 hours, you start the day, you're only allowed to be driving, on duty, even taking breaks, 16 hours before you have to take your next consecutive 8 hours off duty. So basically a 16-hour workday, including breaks, including washroom breaks. Usually showers you would throw into your 8 consecutive hours off. You don't necessarily have to sleep during that 8 consecutive hours, although it's a good idea. But 8 consecutive hours is 8 consecutive hours. Okay? Now, there's also a 30-minute rule. And this one, they will sometimes, I mean, I'm not going to tell you that police will say, to hell with it, you don't have to worry about it, but I would just say stick with the 30-minute rule, and that is you're not allowed to have any breaks on your chart here less than 30 minutes long. You can't take a 15-minute break. Okay, you have to take a 30-minute break, and that's law. Okay, now there are exceptions to driving you can extend your driving hours. The 13-hour rule, you can extend that by what's called deferring. You can take up to 2 off-duty hours during that day and put them towards driving. So you can actually drive 15 hours today. Okay, believe it or not, you can drive 15 hours today. Now, I should say 15 hours in 24-hour period, okay? What happens in that case is, those extra 2 hours you just drove, you must take off the next day. So, in other words, instead of having your 2 extra hours, you know, your 8 consecutive plus your extra 2, you have to have your 8 consecutive plus 4. And you cannot defer, you cannot continuously defer like that. You have to have them the next day, okay? Now, bad weather, you can also take up to 2 off-duty hours the next consecutive 8 day for bad weather. So say you're driving, it's not safe to stop, you've hit the maximum, you've hit your maximum hours, but it's not safe to stop. You got to keep going. You can go up to 2 additional hours of driving due to bad weather, as long as you take those 2 extra hours off the next day. Okay? And that's how that works. Now the 70-hour cycle that I was talking about, in order to reset the 70-hour cycle, that's over 7 days, you have to take 36 off. So that's if you're changing from the 70 to the 120 cycle, you have to take 36 hours off. Now going the other way, if you want to go from the 120 to the 70, you have to take 72 hours off. Okay? Now the 70-hour cycle, I told you, is after 70 hours you need to take 24 off. Now on the 120, you also have to take off 24 hours after your 70. Okay, and then at the very end you have to take your additional hours off, which I believe are another 36. I think it's another 36. So you're actually off more on the 120-hour cycle, but you do get more driving done. So some companies will kind of force you into taking that. I prefer the 70-hour cycle myself, just because it's easier to keep track of. But at any rate, that's basically your hours of service in a nutshell. So I hope you're confused, because I sure as hell was when I went through it the first time. Just keep watching the video and you'll eventually figure it out. Take it easy.